You know, things have been a bit weird around here for the last few weeks. Let's do a fun one. What do you say? Can we do a fun one? Just a nice low-stakes video where there's no evil doppelgangers, no risk of demonetization, and no ominous prophecies. Let's just do a fun one. Let's do another character creation video. That should be easy. And in fact, this video was sponsored by a new D&D book on the DM's Guild, The Ultimate Honk Cyclopedia. They asked me to take a look at a draft of the book. It's still in progress as of this recording, but it should be out today. And they said if I thought it was neat, I could share it with you. And yeah, this rules. It's a hilarious, wild collection of Goose-themed subclasses and spells and magic items and monsters and gods. Everything you could possibly want to play a Goose-themed character for your game or run a Goose-themed campaign. Some of this material is compiled from other Goose-themed supplements they made for 5e, and it's been revised and updated for 5.5, while other stuff is brand new to this PDF. And man, this is a mighty virtual tome, more than 200 pages long, completely human-made with no AI art or writing at all, and every page has some new Goose-themed feature you can drop directly into your games, whether you're a player or a game master. But I don't want you to think that because this is a fun video that I'm not going to take it seriously. So we're going to honestly look at these very absurd character options, and we're going to take a real look at them and make a real D&D character. And it actually helps that despite the inherent absurdity of the premise, the designers clearly put a lot of care and attention into the supplement, because these options actually seem to be mostly well-balanced to me. Like, they seem like they would actually be fun to use in our own games. So today we're going to see what that would look like, and I'm going to build a character using this fantastic supplement. Now today we're mainly focusing on player options, but in order to understand these player options, you do need to know that there are 3 higher powers included in the book. Ansarath, the Honking Chaos, which is basically a multi-headed goose demon lord. He's literally linked to Demogorgon and Yunagu. You've also got the Great Golden Goose, which is linked to prosperity and care, similar to folklore characters like the goose that laid the golden egg. And the Goose, Primordial of Havonk, which is more like a trickster spirit. It has literally led the gods on a centuries-long wild goose chase. And I bring those up because they might play a role with some of the options for clerics or warlocks or paladins or whatever. And speaking of which, this includes 13 subclasses, one for each class in the core rulebook, and for the Artificer. You have the Goosadir, a subclass for the Artificer that throws goose bombs, and they have wild, physics-breaking, random effects. And honestly, all these subclasses are so fun. For example, the Goose Barbarian subclass really leans into the idea of intimidating somebody and being chaotic. That's what a lot of the Goose vibes are like throughout the supplement, being chaotic and unpredictable. Honking Rage is the Barbarian ability that allows you to let out a honk that frightens your enemies and allows your allies to do a little bit of extra damage to them. Foul Step just says that your movements are erratic and unpredictable. Enemies have a harder time hitting you. Honking Retribution allows you to honk and distract an attacking opponent, giving you a brief bonus to your armor class. These are really solid character options. They don't seem too overpowered to me, and they feel like they amplify what makes a barbarian cool, which is being on the front lines, and they're also silly. Now, I'm not going to cover all the subclasses because this video is already going to be long enough as is, and also, a lot of them are fairly similar to the barbarian. They're mainly inspired by a core idea like honking, feathers, flapping, or just generally being chaotic. Those are a lot of the consistent themes. For example, the Bard has these goose feathers they can imbue with a bardic inspiration die, and it lasts for 8 hours or until the holder uses it. That's a fun gimmick, and like with the Barbarian, it actually seems like just a solid subclass that feels, at least to me, like it's basically balanced. I can't promise that these are all fully compliant with everyone's definition of balance. I know that people have their own ideas of them, but like, this does not seem particularly broken to me. And it would be a lot of fun to play with at the table. But a lot of my favorites in the book, the ones that most inspired me to create characters, are actually the ones that are the most deeply tied into geese as more than just flavor. For example, the Cleric subclass, the Order of the Goose, has some general goose powers like being able to conjure spectral wings that you can beat furiously and knock opponents back. That's cool. But my favorite feature of this subclass is the Blessed Trickster, which has to do with money and coins. And that might seem strange until you remember that it's a reference to, once again, the goose that laid the golden egg. The idea here is that you're always going to be able to find gold when you check a container or a corpse, which I understand might seem pretty busted. I can definitely imagine someone using that as an infinite money hack. So you might have to put some limits on that, like you might have to establish that they have to put any of those coins found that way into their pouch. Because by the way, when you play this subclass, you have a small leather pouch with a symbol of your deity on it, and it can hold 50 gold, and if you put a valuable, non-magical item in the bag, it gets converted into coins. But you can only spend that money on goose-related activity. And if there's ever more than 50 gold in the pouch, all the money in the pouch vanishes and gets donated to the Golden Goose, the god we talked about earlier. And at higher levels, you can spend the money from your pouch instantly, it just vanishes, to add damage to an attack, which is really cool because something that starts out primarily as a role-playing gimmick, actually becomes a major part of your battle strategy just a couple levels later, as you can start doling that money out more strategically on certain attacks. And that really works for me. That's a really cool mechanic. I could easily imagine this as a Lady Luck-themed cleric. After all, the Great Golden Goose has a female humanoid form that is very reminiscent of the idea of something like Lady Luck. That's a character I could easily see myself playing, a cleric to Lady Luck. The fighter subclass uses these special long blades that resemble goose feathers, so it is one of the subclasses that just took the idea of a feather and ran with it, but I did still have an idea for a character for this. I think it would be fun to play a character who's from another culture. Maybe he doesn't speak the same language natively, like he's an elf or something, and he refers to his swords as the goose blades. And whenever asked why, the fighter would just say, "It is only natural to model your weapons after the most noble of animals, the mighty and the majestic goose." And everyone else would be left wondering, is this a translation issue? Does he think goose is a different animal? Like, is he talking about a griffin or something? Or does he actually just think geese are really neat? What's going on? Like, that would be fun. Although, I imagine it could get old fast if other players aren't willing to play along and only ask enough questions where it's funny, but not ask so many questions that the joke gets old. This might be a good one-shot character because I just don't think the concept may be strong enough to support a full campaign. That's not a slight against the subclass, that's just a slight against my idea for a character based on that subclass. Now, the Ranger starts to get really interesting. This is when I really started to get very excited about character ideas, because the Ranger has an animal companion. It's a goose, obviously, and that's fun. But they also made sure to establish that if the goose dies, it magically reforms 8 hours later, unless you're also dead. And when it appears again, if the person responsible for the goose's death is also present, the goose attacks that person. I like that a lot. They also have a subclass feature called Foul Magic. That's very good. But honestly, that's not an incredibly silly character. People train geese, and some people might want to play a character who has a little bird sidekick. I would have no problem with one of my players having a goose animal companion, and the only difference here is that there are a few more specific rules for that specific animal in this subclass, rather than what you might get if you used a generic Beastmaster Ranger and gave them a goose. But honestly, if I want to play a character with a goose animal companion, I personally would play the Rogue subclass instead, because as an Avian Menace Rogue, you have 3 pet geese, and as you level up, you can basically train them to pickpocket people. It actually reminds me of other great characters who manipulate animals, like the Pied Piper, or Ratcatcher 2 from the Suicide Squad. Although actually, if I create a character using the subclass, they're going to have much more in common with Fagin from Oliver and Company, a thief and a panhandler who has trained a bunch of animals to steal for him. Now, you don't get your Rogue subclass until level 3, so maybe at level 1, this rogue just has 3 eggs he keeps preciously guarded. At level 2, maybe they hatch and he has 3 baby goslings. Then at level 3, they finally start following him around. This one reminds me of a lot of Pokemon as well. Like, I thought it was so wild as a kid that when you played Pokemon Yellow, unlike Pokemon Red and Blue, which are basically the same game, but in Pokemon Yellow, Pikachu would just jump out of his ball and follow you around. And you could do the same thing with Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. By the way, I've just listed all the Pokemon games I've played. I got a comment recently that was like, "Oh, Mike knows Pokemon." I know those 4 or 5 games. Really, it's all one game. I'm being very generous by calling them different games. I might be willing to play some more Pokemon in the future. Let me know if you want me to do that on stream. That might be fun. But the point is that playing this character would actually get me a lot closer to my dreams of playing a Pokemon Master in D&D. And I initially figured I would name these little sidekicks Huey, Dewey, and Louie, but those were ducks, not geese. So instead we'd probably go with Noah, Holland, and Ken. So this is a really fun character concept. But you know what, let me keep looking at the supplement and see if any of these other subclasses can beat that. That's a tough one to beat, but let's see. The next one I want to highlight is the Sorcerer, the Goose-Blooded, which is fascinating. These are people who are infused with goose magic, and so they literally have physical mutations to represent their goosely kinship. You roll in the chart to see what sort of mutations you might have, and it could be something like having feathers on your head instead of hair, or having webbed feet, or your eyes are further apart than most humanoids, or you have bone spurs on your elbows and wrists, those kinds of things. I honestly didn't know that geese had bone spurs. Maybe I did once, and I just forgotten, but hey, this product is also educational. There you go. And as I mentioned earlier, this product is a compilation of some material that had previously appeared, so a lot of these subclasses had been in 5th edition before, and are now being adjusted for 5e, or for 5.5 rather. But I bring that up again because back when this subclass was first created, you got your subclass for the Sorcerer at level 1. So presumably any character who wasn't multiclassed would enter the story with one of these goose-themed mutations. You just look like a goose guy from the beginning of the game. But now in 5.5, Sorcerers get their subclass at level 3 instead of level 1, which means if you start your campaign at level 1 as a Sorcerer, and then you take this subclass at level 3, then they would just experience this gruesome mutation out of nowhere and suddenly have hollow bones or razor-sharp teeth on their tongue or something like that, which is very funny, very X-Men coded. I'm not gonna lie, I would love to find a way to basically play an X-Man in D&D, and this would be a great way to do that. But also, this is just an interesting subclass. At 14th level, you can turn your arms into wings, so you can fly, but you can't hold or touch any objects, but you can still use your wings as somatic components for a spell. That is weirdly, bizarrely balanced, I think. And at 18th level, you just become a Cronenberg goose monster, and that's fun. I think I still prefer the rogue, though. That's probably what we're gonna make, but this is still a solid option that I would have gone with if I didn't just love the rogue so much. At least this subclass for the rogue. And then we have the warlock. And a lot of these subclasses really lean into the idea of how geese are chaotic. But I think the warlock does a good job of converting this into chaos magic and having that actually still sound fun to play. You have these d6s, and you can spend them to reduce someone's attack roll, saving throw, or ability check, and you get more dice as you level up. But if you roll doubles, you take psychic damage equal to that amount, and your patron commands you to fulfill a certain obligation, which the GM can determine by rolling on a chart and rolling for the number of hours you have until you have to complete it. Some of these options also have secret win conditions, so maybe you follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. That might please your patron because he likes your moxie. He likes the way you sort of subverted his request. Or you might displease your patron because you didn't do what they asked. There's other cool stuff at higher levels as well, like a reroll ability and regaining chaos dice when you knock someone unconscious, as long as their hit point maximum is at least 40, which is nice. It means you can't just refill this by killing a bunch of skeletons. It only comes from significant foes. That's actually really good balance. But honestly, I just really like there's some clear mechanic here for the patron-warlock relationship. As much as I love the lore and role-playing opportunities of the warlock, it can be tough to figure out how to make sure the warlock's patron is actually a present and relevant character in the campaign, and this mechanic is a really smart way to start introducing that into your game. Even if you don't plan to use the Goose Warlock specifically or allow your players to do so, I would still strongly encourage you to take a look at this mechanic and consider making a similar version for your own game. Find some other aspect of your subclass that you could tie this into, something roughly equivalent to rolling doubles on your d6s, and then come up with a list of requests the patron might make and actually start folding those into the game whenever the criteria are met where you displease your warlock patron. But as much as I like this mechanic, I still just don't like playing warlocks. It's just never been my thing, so I'm gonna say we're not making a warlock today. I'm sticking with the rogue. Well, okay, there is the wizard subclass, but I'll be honest, I love wizards, and I'm really trying to make an effort to not make a wizard every time I make one of these videos. I'm gonna still read the wizard subclass, but unless it really grabs me, I'm gonna stick with the rogue. Okay, so when you get your subclass at level 3, you get a magical quill crafted from a goose's feather. Okay, very appropriate. Kind of like the bard, where you got a feather. When you use the quill to copy a spell into your spellbook, you can rename it with a new spell as long as it contains the word honk. Okay. Choose 2 wizard spells from chapter 3 of this book, each of which must be no higher than level 2. Add them to your spellbook for free. Okay, that's really cool. In addition, when you gain access to a new level of spell slots in this class, you can add 1 wizard spell from chapter 3 to your spellbook for free. Oh, cool. Your chosen spell must be a level for which you have spell slots, and you gain the animal handling skill. Okay, so basically it's just giving you access to all these extra geese-flavored spells that we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, well, that's really cool. And then level 3, you get the Bag o' Geese. You gain a magical component pouch leading to a small, extra-dimensional space. The space contains a small coop and a flock of tiny, angry geese. There are a number of geese in your flock equal to your wizard level. Okay. If you lose the pouch, you can make a new one, as you would your spellbook, though you can't make copies of your bag for safekeeping. If you create a new bag, it destroys the old one. Every bag leads to the same extra-dimensional space, ensuring the geese are never lost if you lose your bag. The geese must be fed and watered each day, or they vanish and don't reappear until the start of the following dawn. As a magic action, you can release all the tiny geese who follow you around as a duckling with their mother. You can recall all your tiny geese into their bag as a bonus action. You can expend the geese to enhance your magic or perform magical abilities. Any geese that you expend in this way vanish in a puff of feathers after they are used and reappear in your bag after you finish a long rest. Oh, so you can literally have a bunch of geese Pokemon, so following you around just like with the rogue. Okay, but still, come on, how can you beat having those 3 geese running around and stealing things for you? The rogue is still better. I mean, unless, I don't know, you could use these geese to actually enhance your magic in some way. Let's find out. You can expend these geese to enhance your magic or perform magical abilities. Any geese that you expend in this way vanish in a puff of feathers after they are used and reappear in your bag after you finish a long rest. Yeah, you can do a bunch of things with the geese, actually. You can use them to replace a material component as long as that component costs 300 gold or less. You can take the geese out and hurl them at people, and they'll just... That's an attack in and of itself. Or you can use the geese as a way to transmit a spell to a target, and when you do, the geese is consumed by the spell. The goose is consumed by the spell, but they basically mark that target with goose energy, and then you can spend that energy to reduce one of their d20 rolls by 1d4, so it's kind of like a one-time Bane spell. You can also latch a Spectral Goose onto a target, giving advantage on attack rolls against that target, like a Guiding Bolt, and you know where the target is at all times, unless the target goes to another plane of existence, at which point the goose just jumps off and goes to somebody else within 30 feet of where the target was. So it's possible that if you attach the goose to someone who then casts the Blink spell, you could wind up following the wrong person for a long time if that other target was within 30 feet of the person you attached the goose to. So it's not actually too overpowered. This actually kind of reminds me of a children's song I've been hearing a lot, now that I have a toddler who just turned 2. The song is, 5 little ducks went out one day, over the hill and far away. Mother duck said quack, 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 and only 4 little ducks came back. And it goes on and on like that. One fewer duck comes back in every verse, until there are no little ducks anymore, and the mother duck is so sad. And she says it again, quack, 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 quack. And all of the 5 little ducks came back, and they all come back at the end of the song. That's kind of what's happening here, actually, where you can cast out these ducks, and then they don't come back to you until the next day when they all come back. Quack, 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 quack. I guess it would be honk, 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 honk. So if you played the Goose Wizard, that would essentially make you a mother duck. Well, no, wait, hang on. They're tiny geese, not ducks, so you're not Mother Duck. You're Mother Goose. Oh yeah, I'm definitely making a Goose Wizard. I promise I won't make another wizard again until, I don't know. Let's say I can only make one more wizard character this year. That's the deal. And I'll make other character creation videos as well. I don't just want to make wizards, but I really want to make Mother Goose as a D&D wizard. So this is my last wizard until, I don't know. I make some more first, and then I can do a wizard again, but only one more time this year. That's the rule. Now, for those of you out there who didn't really grow up with the character, Mother Goose is a children's character, and she's supposedly the author of a bunch of nursery rhymes and fairy tales. She's the kind of character you put on the cover of a book full of fairy tales. Now, Mother Goose is name dropped throughout this supplement, and there's even a stat block for a challenge rating 7 fae of the same name, so she exists within the world of this book, which makes sense, of course. But I would say to my game master, I would say, look, I don't think my character is the same as that fae. I think they're different characters. But maybe it's just a nickname that my character has picked up, given her powers and her personality, and most people just don't think about the fact that this name might actually belong to someone else who may not be thrilled about me using it. That feels like a really cool plot hook my GM could do something with if they wanted to. You know what, if my GM is letting me use the Honk Cyclopedia to make my character, I'd imagine they're probably going to be pretty chill with the idea that my character shares a name with a fae. I bet you my GM is cool. After all, names have power in fairy tales, and this is a very literally fairy tale character, so this name might end up getting me in a lot of trouble. Even if it doesn't have the same power over me, it could still put me in a pickle. And speaking of fairy tales, well, that's what Mother Goose does. She speaks of fairy tales. She reads fairy tales to children. And so just imagine playing a D&D character who is a kindly old woman, and for every spell she casts, it sounds like a fairy tale, or a storybook story, or a nursery rhyme, or a kid's song. After all, that's the only media I consume these days, so that would be a fun way to take all these songs and stories I hear throughout my day and apply them to a D&D character. Her spellbook could literally be a book of fairy tales and nursery rhymes, and some of these verbal components would be a no-brainer. For example, is she casting sleep? She might sing, "It's raining, it's pouring, the old man is snoring." Or maybe, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." She casts silence, "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Firebolt, ladybird, fly away home, your house is on fire and your children are all gone." Gust of wind could be, "And I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down." Polymorph would be, "Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a..." I mean, I guess goose would be the most appropriate animal for today, but you could list any animal and transform somebody into that animal. So you could say, "And on that farm he had a Tyrannosaurus Rex," and that would still work. It makes no sense for the song, but that's the spell-casting verbal component. And of course, if she ever gets high enough level to cast Wish, there's really only one option. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might, have this wish I wish tonight. And I wouldn't want there to be a lot of sparks or runes or whimsical sparkles whenever she casts her spells. One of my first videos this year was all about what your magic can look like as a D&D player. And of course, we could go a lot of ways with this one. She could have colorful sparkles like Tinkerbell or the Fairy Godmother. She could create spectral geese with every spell she casts, like a Green Lantern. But I kind of like the idea that her magic would be essentially invisible. She just says these things, and magic happens, and there's not a lot of visual fanfare. For example, if she casts the spell Mage Armor, she might tap her cane on her clothes and say, "The first house was made of straw." And then she might tap her bony arm and say, "The second house was made of sticks." And then tap her cane on the floor and say, And the third house was made out of bricks. And maybe there's a sound of bricks shifting, but that's it. That's all you hear. And that's how you know she cast mage armor on herself, but you wouldn't notice a visible difference. She's a lot more durable now. It almost implies that she has a lot more power than most wizards do, because that's what I talked about in that video anyway. That's the conclusion it implies. Whether or not that's even true, I like the idea that she would seem almost unfazed by things going on. She has a solid head on her shoulders. She always seems like she's in control and not afraid. She'd be this really fantastic support character. She wants to make sure everyone around her has a fantastic, happy life, so she rarely complains. She just does whatever needs to be done to make sure everyone else is safe. But also just imagine how terrifying that would be. To have somebody cast fear on you, and they don't do anything major. They just wrap their cane against a nearby surface. That's the material component. And they wag their finger at you, somatic component. And they say, "Wee Willie Winky runs through the town, upstairs and downstairs in his nightgown, tapping at the window, crying at the lock. Are the children in their bed? For it's past 10 o'clock. That would be terrifying. Or again, at higher levels, she could cast Disintegrate just by saying, "Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, we all fall down." And then she just points her finger, and there's no flash, not a lot of fanfare. Someone just turns into ash. Also, just imagine that moment where she's cornered, and she says, "Maybe you've wondered why they call me Mother Goose." And then she just opens her bag and just throws a handful of geese at somebody. Yeah, this would be a very fun character to play. Now, here's the thing about Mother Goose in our real-world folklore. Sometimes she's an old woman, and other times she's literally a goose dressed as an old woman. But of course, there is no goose ancestry in D&D, so I guess she's going to have to be a human. Is what I would say if I hadn't read the Ultimate Honk Cyclopedia, because they have a new playable species, the Ganderfolk. They're literally just geese, but you can pick things up with your wings. You have a swim speed and a limited fly speed. And you know how D&D used to have these specific details for what the culture was like for any given species, and a lot of that stuff got stripped away when 5.5 came out, so there's a lot less assumptions being made about the default lifestyle of a dwarf or an elf or a tiefling or whatever. Well, the Ganderfolk section has a blend of all my favorite features you might find in the species from 5e and 5.5. They have a section about the kinds of communities built by the Ganderfolk, villages on stilts, very fun detail, would love to have one of those in my game. They have the description of the motivations of the Ganderfolk, which is the needs of the community, which absolutely does a fantastic job of capturing what I think is interesting about this character. She wants to take care of others. She wants to be the mother hen, so to speak, and that's very much in line with how the Ganderfolk are described in this book. I don't like the idea that she would have gotten the name Mother Goose as a nickname on her travels, but if I wanted to know her actual name, there is a section on names in this book, which for some reason, 5.5 Player's Handbook does not have a list of names with each species. That's gone, and I think that sucks, and I'm glad there are names in the Ganderfolk section. Now, if I'm playing Mother Goose as a Ganderfolk, I don't know if I could get over the existential implications of playing a goose wizard who has a bag of tiny geese. Well, I guess it would be kind of like that scene in All-Star Superman when he opens his hands and the teeny tiny Kryptonians from Kandor fly out of it, which was inspired by the comic book in the Silver Age where Superman could shoot out a tiny Superman out of his fingers. That's kind of the thing with playing the Ganderfolk with any of these subclasses. Like, if you play a goose rogue who's trained 3 geese, I don't know, is that technically any different than a gnoll with a hyena pet? It also kind of feels like Goofy hanging out with Pluto. Like, you're both dogs, so what's happening here? Do I need to call an adult? Anyway, I think the Ganderfolk is fun. I will admit, I was picturing this character as a humanoid, more like Aunt May. No, not that one. An older woman. No, older. Older? Yeah, there she is. That being said, now that I'm discussing the Ganderfolk, I do think that's fun too. I like the idea of the old lady who's casting magic even without trying, but also I like the Goose Wizard. And you know what? The title of this video is Play a Goose Wizard. That was meant to be referred to the subclass, but you literally cannot get more Goose Wizard than being a goose who's also a wizard. So we're going with the Ganderfolk. Our version of Mother Goose will be a Ganderfolk. And besides, you can not play a goose all the time. Most of my characters are not geese. Probably next time I make a character, they won't be a goose. So if we have a resource where you can play a goose, you know I gotta play a goose. Now this book also comes with 16 new spells. I'm not gonna go through all of them today, but I'm gonna take a look at the wizard spells since they're relevant to this character. Like there's a spell called Goose Featherfall. You might think, oh, they just retitled Featherfall, it's the same spell. No. It's a 2nd level spell. It's a reaction when you fall, and you wave your feather in the direction of a creature within 10 feet of you, and they have to make a strength save, or they fall with you. That could be very good. Honkiest Laughter is not Tasha's Hideous Laughter by another name. Instead, it makes the target frightened of geese, so all non-geese creatures make them laugh out loud, so they do 1d6 thunder damage to all other non-goose creatures within 5 feet of them. Plumage armor makes feathers grow on someone. It gives them temporary hit points, and while they have those hit points, 5 hit points I believe it is, they're resistant to fire and cold. They ignore negative effects for fighting underwater. That's a pretty cool spell. Quill the Dead makes a skeletal hand appear with a quill, and you can remotely tickle someone, making them take psychic damage and laugh. Summon Goose Guardian makes a large goose appear, and this is another case where the goose might have different powers depending on whether you invoke Ansarath the Honking Chaos, or the Great Golden Goose, or the Goose. Web Limbs gives a target webbed hands or webbed feet, your choice, and each one has advantages and drawbacks. So you could cast this on an ally and give them a better swimming speed, but having webbed feet makes it hard for them to dash. Having webbed hands means they can't wear gloves or rings, and it's hard to do anything dexterous with their hands. So it's a trade-off, and I like that a lot. Oh, also, they just are this way now until they get remove curse cast on them, or greater restoration, or heal. But other than that, it's permanent. And finally, on the list of new wizard spells, we have the 9th level spell, Power Word Quill, which is not only an amazing name, but also you summon the Sacred Quill of Power by saying its secret name. And you can tickle someone within 5 feet of you. Unless someone stops you in the next round, you tickle them until they die. Or if they're a character with legendary actions, they take 10d10 psychic damage instead. And that's a nice olive branch to the GM. It's not going to instant kill the more powerful foes. Smart design. But instead, you could use the quill to ask any question, and the quill will write the answer. It may not be a complete or useful answer, but it will be true. And every time you summon the quill with this spell within 1 year, there's a growing chance that you just summon a normal quill instead. Now, these are all fun spells, but I'm actually not going to commit to taking any of them just yet. Instead, I'm going to ask you to let me know what kids' songs or nursery rhymes might make sense for each of these spells. I think that is honestly going to determine a lot of the spells this character would take as she leveled up, because if I can't think of a song or a rhyme that could serve as a verbal component for a particular spell, then I'm not going to take that spell. Because I like the idea that she's writing these spells in her book of nursery rhymes, so they would all have a corresponding rhyme or song or story. And so even if it's just an excerpt, and even if there's a part of the story or song that's been used for another spell, just having that gimmick would help me play Mother Goose much more authentically.
Stop all this nonsense.
Who are you? What's going on?
I'm afraid everything that's going on here is entirely too silly. You need to shut it down.
Oh, what are you, the fun police?
That's right, Constable Killjoy, fun police. And I'm demanding that you stop talking about Goose-themed D&D characters immediately.
What? Why?
They're far too silly. You're advocating for people bringing joke characters into their D&D games, and any players who take your advice and make joke characters are going to wind up ruining their campaigns.
Hold on, I never said anything about joke characters. The closest I got was when my character idea for the fighter didn't feel strong enough or fleshed out enough to support a full campaign, when I felt like they might be a little jokey, a little silly. But I think you can use these tools to create legitimate, playable D&D characters who won't disrupt the campaign in any way. Can I make my case for that, please? Is that a yes? Or okay, I guess so. Okay, so here's the thing. Yes, the whole geese player options gimmick is very silly, and it's possible some of these don't seem like they would work for your game. But you can always just reskin those particular features to make something that flows a little bit better for you. For example, the barbarian doesn't have to honk to startle people. It could be a war cry, or the erratic movements that it makes to make it harder to hit. Those don't have to be inspired by the movements of a goose. You could have said, turn that into a reference to Dune, the way the Fremen walk on the sand in an unpredictable fashion to avoid being attacked by sandworms. I already discussed how the cleric could essentially represent someone who worships Lady Luck, but I'll take it a step further and say if you wanted to play this character in the world of Exandria, you could easily play them as a cleric of Arathis, the Lawbearer. The monk subclass is seriously just a very straightforward martial arts subclass. If anything, it just reminds me of that wave of wire fu movies from the early 2000s, with specific poses meant to represent certain animals. A goose could easily be one of those, that's not a big deal. But also you have the high level ability to basically fly, which is exactly the same kind of thing you might see in a martial arts movie. You don't need to flavor that character at all. You can just drop them right into any campaign, and they work great. Even my Mother Goose character might seem a little silly to some of you out there who aren't picturing what I'm picturing. But the reason I have such a clear image in my head is because this character is directly inspired by another fellow character in my Curse of Strahd campaign, the first time I was a player in that campaign. About halfway through the game, we got ambushed by Strahd, and it went very, very badly for us. We basically said, holy shit, if we don't get our hands on some ability to counterspell him, we're going to die. So we asked if we could invite another player to the campaign to play a wizard. And thus we got our new player character, Nana. She was a little gnome wizard, but she was the nanny for a prince, so I believe that's why she knew magic, so she could help protect him if she ever had to, or maybe it was just to entertain him with magical effects during her stories. But now here she was, dragged into this horrible world of Barovia, this gothic horror nightmare, And she was still this really sweet old woman. Sometimes she would see horrible things and they would affect her, but most of the time, she was invaluable for keeping our spirits up. And that's really the character I would love to play. That's who Mother Goose is to me. This is not a character who I would imagine has a bunch of solo adventures on her own, unlike someone like the Judge. But I would love for this character to pop in and out of being supporting figures in other campaigns because I don't think she's a joke. She absolutely feels real to me. I don't think of her as a joke character because even though she has some silly elements, like she has a bag full of geese, she is an actual goose. Well, lots of things in D&D are already pretty silly. She doesn't seem to go beyond the pale for me. And throughout this video, no matter which class I've been looking at, I've been very openly trying not to make a joke character. I will make a joke character in the future. That is a topic I do want to cover another day, where the entire premise for the character boils down to just one joke. But in this case, that's not how this character started, and I don't think that's how most of these characters started, with the exception of the Gooseblade Fighter. That really was the only idea I had. That's kind of a joke character. But who knows? You might feel differently. You might be able to come up with a more nuanced fighter concept than I was. With the other subclasses, I wanted to highlight the options in the supplement that I thought you could actually use to make an interesting, real character. Now, if you heard me describe some of these player options and you don't want to use them in your game because you don't like the mechanics, okay, that's fair. I have mixed feelings about the wizard not being to pay for material components because you can spend a goose on them every day, but in some of my games, it wouldn't be an issue, and in others, it would be a much bigger problem. And I could easily imagine a scenario where I bring this book to my GM and ask them if we can use a particular subclass or a spell, and it would be a negotiation. And they might have some changes they would want to make before they would be willing to allow me to use it in the game because they don't think the mechanics are properly balanced, at least for the campaign they want to run. That would be perfectly valid. But if you're worried that this is too silly, I just don't agree. Like, yes, it is silly, but I don't think that means you have to play a joke character. After all, people make joke characters all the time based on material in the core rules. If you don't trust your players not to make joke characters if you give them a goose supplement, fair enough, don't deploy this in your games. But if you have players who actually want to make real characters with any material they're given, you could absolutely still do that with the Ultimate Honk Cyclopedia.
Nice try, but these aren't just goofy character options. These characters demand your Dungeon Master allows goose powers into their world. And that's not fair on your Dungeon Master. They put in a lot of work. They tried to come up with consistent tone for your world, make adventures that they think everyone in the party will enjoy, and then you're just gonna piss all over that with your goofy little goose powers? You're disturbing the peace by introducing goose gods and goose transformations and geese as animal companions, and none of that is consistent with the tone the Dungeon Master is trying to capture. You can claim that your wizard wouldn't feel too silly for Curse of Strahd, but what if you give people this sort of resource and they're not as responsible as you are? You need to set an example for impressionable people. If you get them hooked on silliness, they could wind up bringing that silliness to their home games. They'll demand more and more silliness to satisfy their fix, it'll tear campaigns apart, and that's why I have a zero tolerance policy for silly third-party character options.
You know, on some level, I guess I do understand what you're saying. We need to make sure our players understand what sort of tone their game master is expecting, and there are lots of tables where the game master would not be on board with something as silly as this. And I have to admit, sometimes I would be one of them. If someone came to me with this supplement and said they just want to play a joke character, I would not be into it. They really would need to sell me on the idea that they weren't going to just play it for jokes, that they were actually going to take the campaign seriously.
Exactly.
But I've had that exact same problem with the official material as well. I've had somebody come to the table once playing an Oath of the Ancient Paladin, human ancestry, nothing wrong with that, right? But his character's name was Buddy Friend, and his nickname was Pal. Buddy, Pal, Friend. And when we got to the table, his character was just wandering off and doing silly things immediately because it felt like it made sense for his character, according to him, and it caused some friction at the table because that wasn't the tone of the game I'd set up, and it wasn't the tone everyone else was on board with.
Well then, that sounds like exactly the sort of situation where someone shouldn't get their hands on a book of Goose-themed player options.
No, I don't think that is the point. He just wanted to play a funny character, and there would be plenty of tables where that wasn't a problem. I've been at those tables as a player. That's not an issue. The issue was that I hadn't done a good job of pitching the campaign.
I don't think it would be possible to properly pitch a campaign where the players could potentially play characters whose primary powers come from poultry. It's entirely too silly.
Sure, I guess if a player brings this to their GM and asks them to incorporate these player options into the game, it could clash with what the GM has planned.
Exactly.
We want to make sure that players are making characters that make sense for the campaign the GM wants to run and the other players want to play through.
Precisely. We need conformity or all we'll get is anarchy.
I understand. Thankfully, the Honk Cyclopedia has a whole collection of monsters, magic items, and even an adventure, so the GM can also get in on the fun. I'm not done here. We are talking about how the GM could actually use this to make a Goose-themed campaign. I'm going to speed run these a little bit. I don't want to spend as much time talking about the GM resources, but I do think they're fun. Like Ansarath, the Honking Chaos, the Goose Fiend, could genuinely be a horrifying concept. The chaos creature that not even the other demon lords could control. But on the flip side, you could almost handle Ansarath as almost a parody of cult storylines, especially if your players feel like they know the tropes by now. For the Great Golden Goose, I can literally imagine exactly how she would fit into my game world. It would actually already work really well. And then there's the Goose, a primordial force that plagued the deities and primordials against each other to create chaos in the early days of creation, and then couldn't be found afterwards, leading the immortals on a wild goose chase. That's a fun concept, and yes, I could imagine fitting that into my world. I'm always down to include more supernatural tricksters. Is this like a Loki type? If so, then which kind? Is it like Marvel's Loki, working towards evil goals from his hiding place? Or more like mythological Loki, just doing seemingly random shit out in the open? Either way, with Loki, you know he's going to be fighting in Ragnarok at the end of days. He has his own goals to conquer. No pun intended. So is that his deal? Is that the Goose's deal? Or is this someone more like Hugh, or the Great Gazoo, or Mr. Mxyzptlk, who actually appears in front of the mortals and messes with them just for fun? Is the Goose actually his name, or just what he goes by here in this plane of reality that we can perceive him at? Does he actually look like a goose, or does he just take this form because he thinks it's funny? Either way, it actually gives me a lot to work with. And then there's magic items. This book has genuinely so many goose-themed magic items. There's more than 20 in the book overall. That's awesome. There's the Cane of the Silly Goose, which is a +1 quarterstaff for spellcasters. So if you like the idea of a wizard beating people up with a cane, like Rafiki or Aunt May that one time, then this is perfect. This is the Eyeglasses of Mother Goose, a legendary magic item linked to a powerful fae that we talked about earlier. And they allow you to spend 10 minutes reading beautiful stories and nursery rhymes, and your allies get advantage against charmed and frightened effects for the next 2 hours as they're bolstered by the stories you told. You also get the Goosiance cantrip, where for 1 minute, you can't speak, but attack rolls against your target are reduced by 1d4. You know, between the spell that means you can't talk when you cast it and the other proficiencies that feel kind of redundant with wizards, I don't think my wizard would use these glasses that often if they popped up in the campaign, but they demonstrate that my character concept really lines up with what the creatives had in mind, capturing the essence of the character of Mother Goose and putting her in D&D. But there are so many other really fun magic items here, like the Apparagoose of Qualish. It's just like the apparatus of Qualish, but instead of transforming from a big metal cylinder to a big metal crab, it transforms from a big metal egg to a big metal goose, and that's just fun. I like that. There's also the Honk Skull Helm. I like that a lot. It's a helmet that has a big bill across it, like a waterfowl, and it's genuinely a decent low-level magic item. You have disadvantage on perception checks and ranged attack rolls, because a helmet like that would be terrible for your visibility, but you get a +1 to your armor class, and you can make a bonus action unarmed strike attack with your helmet. It's silly, but it's fun. It's good, actually. The crown of the flaming goose is forged from chains that were used to try to capture Ansarath, the Honking Chaos, and it gives you some fire powers and some limited fire resistance, and it curses you, so you take psychic damage if you use the help action, or heal someone, or just generally help somebody out. That actually kind of rules. There's also a goose figurine that becomes a demi-goose of many mouths, but it's uncontrollable. It doesn't answer you in any way, and when the magical effect ends, there's a chance it might not become a figurine again, and you just have this unleashed wild monster in the world now. That's fantastic. But then there's the Honkenbonker, a legendary maul. I don't need to tell you anything about it, right? It's called the Honkenbonker. It's a really good magic item, but it also has a fun name to say. This would be an iconic magic item in your game. Your players would love the Honkenbonker. I love the Honkenbonker. Let's be honest, you love the Honkenbonker. We all love the Honkenbonker. But probably my favorite magic item is the Golden Goose Egg. And there are 100 different items or effects you can get when you open the egg. That's a chart that's brand new. It was not republished from any older material. And it's sort of appropriate given the time of year that we are right now, that you have no idea what's inside this egg, because it's like an Easter egg. Like when you open the egg and you randomly roll to see what was inside, you might get a cooked goose leg imbued with the Webbed Limbs spell, or a bunch of golden glitter and a charm of the golden goose, or a random trinket, or one of the other magic items from the supplement, like the Honkarina. Or you could literally get another smaller egg inside, and I hope you roll again and you get the same result again. I really want there to be a rushing nesting galls of golden eggs inside. Very, very, very unlikely, but like, how amazing would that be, right? This item is obviously linked to the idea of the goose that lays the golden egg, and so they say you can basically tie this to some monsters from the book, which are the Goose of Golden Feathers, not really a monster, but a creature, or the Honkdra, which is a Hydra goose. But you could also use this item to connect it to the giant goose from Bigby's Glory of the Giants. So it's kind of compatible with this other existing D&D supplement, which is really cool, and something you really only get away with because it's on DM's Guild. And then there are a whole bunch of monsters, more than 45 monsters for all tiers of play. There's the stats for the primordial creatures we already discussed, and they have their own high-level 2-phase stat blocks, very cool. But there's also the Begander, a CR6 beholder with geese heads for eye stalks, very fun. There's stats for multi-headed demon geese, undead geese, tornadoes of geese, and just geese, the real-life animals, either as a flock or just as a goose. There's goose flayers, just geese with mind flayer tentacles. There's a Griffus, which is just a griffin, but part of it is also a goose, and it genuinely feels like that could be something out of mythology. Like, it's not that different when you might find in most mythology. There's a Megusa, which is a Medusa with goose heads instead of snake heads, and like, fun visual, great name, solid monster. Then there's the Gelatinous Honkcube, a gelatinous cube with goose legs and wings and a head. And I don't think I'd make it a cube with the wings and heads and legs. That feels like it doesn't need to be done that way, but I like having a big ooze in the shape of a goose. That's fun. I just don't know if I need to have it have a boxy middle, but if you like that, go for it. But what I love is the chart of items floating inside the creature. That's a very cool, very tantalizing bit of design. And there's these huge monsters, legendary titans with goose-like tendencies, right on the cover. Instead of the Tarrasque, you have the Honkrask, not pictured here, but there is one in the book. Instead of King Kong, King Honk. And instead of Godzilla, you have Goosezilla, the king of the monsters. Mahonksters. No regrets. And Goosezilla actually shares some DNA, no pun intended, with his inspiration, specifically the idea of experimentation gone too far. The book says that there were these archmages experimenting with magic near a great lake, hoping the water would absorb the expended magic without issue. But there were unforeseen consequences. The water was polluted and contaminated, and the local wildlife was mutated as a result, and thus you get Goosezilla. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like you could legitimately build a campaign around these mages conducting these experiments near a lake and the strange and horrible things it led to. And then Goosezilla emerges. Maybe those mages are the big bad for one season. They're going around doing lots of rogue magic, and along the way you discover where they were testing their magic, and you watch in horror as Goosezilla emerges. Or go the other way. The monster emerges, goes on a rampage, and you need to figure out what happened. You discover these mages are responsible, and so part of the adventure isn't just about stopping the monster, but it's also about bringing these mages to justice. Now at this point you might have two questions. The first is, Mike, isn't that just the plot of the first Godzilla movie? And to that I would say, I don't know. I haven't seen most of the Godzilla movies. I saw the American one from 2014, where Godzilla's origin was pretty vastly different, where the Titans are more of a response to humanity in general destroying the world with things like climate change. I also saw the American one from the 90s, and I do think he was a product of nuclear testing, but it was done by France now and not America. That's weird. I wonder why these American movies keep changing Godzilla's origin. That seems strange to me. But your second question might be, Mike, you've talked about 100 pages worth of stuff. Surely that's the last of it, right? Nope, there is still even more. The book also includes the Emmy-winning one-shot adventure Sweet Dreams Are Made of Geese by Jamie Chan, and it's been revised to fit into the wider Gooseverse of the Ultimate Honcyclopedia. So if you're not sure how to incorporate some of this material into your game, don't worry, there's an adventure that is going to show you exactly how it would look to run a Goose-themed game of D&D. This is a really cool, really creative, really fun and unique product. And it was just published on the DM's Guild today, so go ahead, pick it up right now. There's a link in the description for the Ultimate Honcyclopedia. Let them know that I sent you. I would love to support other independent projects whenever possible in the future, so let's show that we have the best audience ever. Let's go pick up the Ultimate Honcyclopedia right now. Oh, and speaking of supporting artists, like I said, this project is entirely human-made. There's no AI used in the writing or the art at all. And honestly, you can tell, right? This is exactly the kind of thing that could only have been made by humans. No AI would ever create something like this. And AI is never going to sit down and just decide to make a goose wizard or a goose hydra. AI is just going to regurgitate what it's already seen because that's what it thinks you want. This is uniquely human because it's just this weird, silly little joke that a bunch of creative people decided to take seriously enough to make something that I think is really fun and cool. I'm honestly astonished at the scope of this project, but it came together because a bunch of people thought it would be really fun and funny to make it and take it just seriously enough you could actually play with this material. But not so seriously that they lost track of what actually makes it fun. In my most recent video, I talked about how you should divide your campaign into distinct story arcs with their own clear villains and objectives. And honestly, if you structured a campaign arc around a Cult of the Honking Chaos or the Primordial Havonk, you could just blitz through a bunch of goose-themed monsters and magic items, and then once that story arc is done and you move on to your next one, your players will fondly look back at that time where they had to fight a bunch of goose-themed monsters for a few levels, and maybe they got a couple of fun magic items and maybe some custom spells out of the deal. On the other hand, maybe you've been rolling your eyes at all these puns, maybe you can't get behind the whole goose-themed story arc because you just think your players are going to lose interest or not take the game as seriously. Well, you could just take some of these monsters and magic items and spread them out, so your players don't even notice that you're using all that much from this one book, but you're slowly sneaking in all these goose-related materials and just Normalizing the idea that sometimes a monster might be a big goose, and that's part of how your D&D games work. Or hell, just save this material for the occasional one-shot. Maybe in between story arcs, your players need a little break from the doom and gloom of fighting an army of reanimated NPCs or whatever. Just give them a mission where they fight a Medusa with a bunch of geese on her head. Go for it. And honestly, let your players play goose wizards, or goose monstrosity sorcerers, or fighters with fancy goose blades, or criminals with a few little geese Pokemon that do crimes for them. After all, never forget that at the end of the day, this is a game. What we're talking about today is a game. My channel is about a game. So have some fun with it.
That's it. I'm charging you with disturbing the peace.
What? Why?
This is all far too silly. You're gonna ruin D&D.
So, hold on. Wait, hold on. You keep saying too silly. That means there is a level of silliness that you think is acceptable.
Absolutely, and this is far too silly. This does not fit into what most people imagine from a game of D&D.
You know, that actually might be true for some groups. Some groups are not going to like this book. It's not going to fit with the sort of campaigns they like to run, and that's perfectly fine. But as long as the players and the GM are on the same page about how this could work for their game, then I don't see anything wrong with this. And really, it's not much sillier than your standard D&D campaign.
Well, maybe your games are silly, but I can promise you the average D&D campaign is a very serious affair, where the future of reality is decided in epic battles of life and death.
Well, that's not true. D&D can get pretty silly. And in fact, maybe we get too hung up on trying to tell these epic stories. I've definitely been guilty of that. Maybe we could all stand to make our campaigns a little bit sillier. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you for the delay as I got this video done. I had actually a bunch of stuff going on this week because of Super Geek Tyke's second birthday. That was just this past Monday, 2 days ago. 2 years old. Incredible. And thank you so much to one of my viewers, Ariadne, for sending a gift off the wish list. It was super nice. It was a bunch of like magnetic tiles that was on our wish list. Here it is right now. My child didn't build this. I built this during the night so that, you know, he would come out in the morning and be like, oh, you can like build stuff with this. I was trying to sort of show him how it works. And honestly, I just had so much fun with this that like, even if my child doesn't get a lot of use out of it, I am. So thank you so much, Ariadne, for sending that through. And what else is going on? Not a lot. Keep your eyes peeled for another video coming this week. We're going to answer the question I talked about at the end of this one. And besides that, new Patreon live stream coming soon. If I figured out the date for it, it's going to be up here. And if I haven't, then it's not. And make sure to watch this video right here. This is the video I just did, a whole video about making your big bads that it's sort of for individual arcs of your story. That's covered in this video right here, so make sure to watch that. And until next time, play fair and have fun.